There's no way around it. Professional wrestling is a seedy business with an often disturbing past. Just look at Vince McMahon, for Christ's sake. For the longest time in its history, wrestling was largely overlooked by the mainstream media, meaning a lot of bad things committed by a lot of bad people were allowed to go unchecked. Buckle up, buckaroos. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, and these are 10 hushed scandals that rocked wrestling. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 10. Vince and Rita Chatterton. Chatterton was the first female referee WWE ever hired, but she has subsequently been erased from their history. Why? Trust me, Simon, not now. Rita claims that in 1986 she asked Vince for more work, leading to the boss insisting on a quid pro quo arrangement in exchange for sexual favors. Vince and Linda subsequently sued, but eventually dropped the lawsuit, claiming they needed to focus on the steroid trial. In 2010, the website Talking Points Memo attempted to reproduce the text of the suit on their website, only to be threatened with legal action themselves. Let's move on, shall we? Number 9. The plane ride from hell. The infamous plane ride from hell somehow managed to sidestep mainstream media attention at the time. In 2002, such behavior was still considered par for the course from wrestling, when stuff like this was still a thing. But it became notorious amongst fans. According to Sean Waltman, many of the wrestlers heading back to the US following a UK tour were openly indulging in a variety of drugs and alcohol. Kurt Hennig wrestled Brock Lesnar into the emergency door. Ric Flair strutted up and down the aisles while naked except for his robe. Try and get rid of that mental image. And Michael Hayes almost peed on Linda McMahon, amongst many other things. Hennig was immediately let go, as was Scott Hall. Goldust was also released after drunkenly singing to his ex-wife Terry over the PA system. And people say romance is dead. And Flair was sued by 2 of the flight attendants, kind of understandably. Number 8. The Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin sex scandal. It's alleged that during an NWA car ride, not that one, front office worker Terry Garvin asked Barry Orton, Randy's uncle and Bob's brother, to polish his gear stick, as it were, only to be met with a firm rebuff. Years later, Garvin joined the WWF, due in part to his friendship with Pat Patterson, and word soon broke out that he was harassing ring boys in the company and propositioning them for sex. One of those ring boys, Tom Cole, refused Garvin's advances and was promptly fired. When asked about it on a radio show, Orton corroborated Cole's story with his own murky experience years earlier. Amidst all the grim accusations, somehow nobody implicated faced trial. Number 7. Buck Zumhofe. Small-time Midwest wrestler rock and roll Buck Zumhofe was sent down for 25 years in 2014 after being convicted of first-degree and third-degree charges of criminal sexual misconduct. As if that wasn't bad enough, the victim was believed to be his daughter. A known creep amongst the wrestling fraternity for years, he had previously been convicted of fourth-degree sexual misconduct involving a minor back in 1986 and was again sent to prison for the same crime in 1989. Now in his mid-60s, it's unlikely the child molester will see the world outside bars again. Number 6. Sid versus Arn in a real-life scissors match. After knocking a few cold ones back during a WCW overseas tour in 1993, what could possibly go wrong? Arn Anderson began wondering why the company wasn't drawing. Sid Vicious, himself at least 2 sheets to the wind, tactlessly replied it was because Double A's best friend Ric Flair was, quote, an old man who needed to get the out of the way. Beer hit faces, words were exchanged, but the two didn't quite come to blows. Back in his room, Vicious continued to stew about the incident to the point where he broke a chair with the sole intention of battering Double A with one of the legs. He furiously knocked on his door, and Anderson, noting that Sid was brandishing a weapon, picked up a nearby pair of scissors before opening it. And as we all know, it's rock, not chair legs, that beats scissors, and Sid was stabbed a number of times before wresting the cutters away from Arn. Arn was then reportedly stabbed 20 times, and Vicious required surgery. Unsurprisingly, Eric suspended the pugilistic pair when they returned. Number 5. Duggan and SHEIK arrested. The two were heated rivals, with Duggan as basically a wrestling American flag and the Iron Sheik as the evil foreigner. Thousands of fans across the country watched them battle in sold-out arenas, but that didn't stop the two of them risking burning the curtain by traveling on the road together. The duo were pulled over during a traffic spot, only to be found in possession of marijuana and cocaine. This in itself wouldn't actually have been too big a deal if they weren't together, but seeing the hated rivals hanging out in their free time blew things up. Vince, a man who gets this angry when someone sneezes or nods, was furious as the story hit papers across the country and fired them both. Many fans suspected that wrestling wasn't on the up and up at the time, but it became almost impossible to believe otherwise after the incident. R.I.P. in peace, kayfabe. Number 4. The steroid scandal. Dr. George Zahorian was a state-appointed ringside physician for the WWF. From 1984 to 1989, he supplied steroids and painkillers to many of the top names in the company, including Hulk Hogan, The Ultimate Warrior, Roddy Piper, and even Vince McMahon himself. Am I all right to say this? Well, too late now. However, after selling to a bodybuilder turned informant, Zahorian was indicted by the feds in 1991. The government hoped he would cooperate so they could go after bigger, comedy-necked brace fish, Vince McMahon. The trial commenced in 1994 with Hulk Hogan subpoenaed to take the stand. But thanks to the testimonies of Hogan and Nails, Vince was acquitted. Hogan said Vince never told him to take steroids. What a swerve! Whilst Nails came off as a hostile witness who clearly had an unhealthy level of built-up animosity towards his old employer. Although, I'd feel the same if I was made to look like this. Right, I hope you enjoyed that, because things get very dark from here. Number 3. Bruiser Brody's murder. During a tour of Puerto Rico in 1988, Bruiser Brody had a meeting with WWC promoter Jose Gonzalez in the shower, which sounds pretty shady to begin with. That proved to be the case, as after a brief shouting match, Brody was stabbed to death. You have to wonder why Gonzalez was carrying a knife with him in the first place. He later pleaded self-defense during his trial. Brody may have been hard-headed and incredibly difficult to work with, but he was no killer. To add to the tragedy, Gonzalez only spent one night in jail. Key witness Tony Atlas left the country fearing for his life, and Dutch Mantell, also on the scene that night, was subpoenaed after the trial took place. It was one of the industry's most shocking incidents, made all the worse by the complete lack of repercussions for Brody's killer. Number 2. Jimmy Snuka and Nancy Argentino. In 1983, Snuka's girlfriend, Nancy Argentino, passed away after an apparent head trauma. According to the wrestler's version of events, he was traveling to a show with Argentino when she asked to stop for a bathroom break. He pulled over, and then on the way back to the car, she slipped and hit her head on a rock. Later that night, when he returned from the show to their motel room, he found her unconscious, and she passed away a few hours later. A more plausible explanation, one consistent with the signs of domestic abuse on Argentino's body, was that Snuka violently pushed her against a wall, she lost consciousness, and never woke up. Argentino's autopsy was damning, showing that her death had been caused by repeatedly being hit with a blunt object. Somehow, this wasn't enough to arrest Snuka. Just 2 weeks before he died, he was declared mentally unfit to stand trial. He went to the grave without any justice being served, a fact made all the more painful for Argentino's family by WWE's touching tribute to the probable killer. Number 1. Chris Benoit. Benoit was considered one of the best wrestlers on the planet while he was alive, but he was disturbingly growing very paranoid at the tail end of his career and life. He started to believe he was being followed, he thought he was going to be cut from WWE at any point, and in addition to that, his personal life was going to hell. A mix of a toxic marriage, severe head trauma, and a body filled with 10 times the normal amount of testosterone all came together one terrible night to end 3 lives. An ill-advised memorial aired of Benoit on Raw the day his body was found. As the show progressed, the details poured in, and it seemed increasingly likely that Benoit had killed his wife, child, and then himself. McMahon appeared on ECW the following night, offered a mea culpa, and vowed that his former employee's name would never be mentioned again on WWE TV. So far, it hasn't. WWE would like you to forget all about Chris Benoit. He is the ultimate hushed wrestling scandal.
Oh, wasn't that something? Don't forget to like, share and subscribe below, and also the people who made this lovely video, they're appearing right here. But if you're thinking to yourself, I want to see more content, Jules, then why not look above my head, as there probably is some. I don't know. I can't see it. Until next time.